Coming up on Windows Weekly, first and foremost, well, we hear about Paul's hands-on with the Omnibook Ultra, a new laptop with some interesting corners. And we also talk about Microsoft 365, the summit that Microsoft held with CrowdStrike and what was actually said there and what matters, plus a really wacky machine from Lenovo that honestly all three of us couldn't get enough of, before we round things out with Xbox Corner and, of course, the tips and picks of the week. All of that coming up on Windows Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Windows Weekly, episode 899, with Paul Thurrott, Richard Campbell, and me, Mikah Sargent. Recorded Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. Functional, but disturbing. It's time for Windows Weekly, the show where I, this week, Mikah Sargent, talk to two of the foremost Windows watchers of the world. We've got veteran Microsoft I like to use the sort of show description that we have.
The whip, the cool whip version
the
of
cool
the
whip. Yeah, it's interesting that you are both described as veteran Microsoft insiders. I don't know what that means.
That's but, that's a cool way of saying old.
That's what
I know what you're doing.
Oh, Paul Thurrott, where are you coming to us from this
If only
week?
we know. I'm in Pennsylvania.
All right. You're at home. And I hear that Richard Campbell is oddly enough at home as well.
Oddly enough. Don't worry. You get one more week of me here. Actually, 2 more weeks of me here. And then it's going to be something different every week for a month.
Do we have to pay special taxes since it's Canada, U.S., sort of? I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that. You know, if you ask too many questions, bad things happen.
That's true.
I try not.
Speaking of which, is there an update on your phone situation, Richard? Did you?
Oh, that's right.
I have ordered a Pixel 9.
Okay. And you ordered it from Google directly or?
And it's
phone. It's slightly swollen. It's,
slightly swollen.
One corner of it's
slightly
up.
Terroristy.
Yeah. I'm only charging it with the Q charger because I think it's actually was a bad charge that did damage to it.
Oh, interesting.
It doesn't continue to inflate. So it's functional, just disturbing.
Yeah.
It's functional but dispering.
Yeah.
It bobbles on the table.
That's how my therapist describes me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Functional but disturbing.
So
anyway,
I didn't even get that.
Yeah, she who must be obeyed saw it yesterday, and when are you replacing that? I'm like, I'm ordering it now. I really wanted the Pro, but they're out of stock everywhere, so I'm getting the regular.
Would you have gotten the bigger Pro, or you just wanted
the smaller Pro?
Yeah.
6.8 is not a phone; it's a tablet.
Oh, I don't know. I wish it could be bigger. That's the name of my sex tape.
Well, I could have gone for the Fold, but that's a couple of grand.
I can't stop doing that now. That's my new problem.
Well, this is the therapy show. So, Oh no, wait, it's not. It's the show where we talk about Microsoft.
What?
And now that we've said hello to our guests or to our hosts, let's kick things off with Windows 11.
Wow,
why not? It is ostensibly about Windows.
It's just so weird to start with Windows now.
Yeah, we'll go over some of the weirdness of this year in Windows and how and when 24H2 happens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. But the overreaching theme here is that Microsoft has been very vague and either vague or non-communicative about this topic. And it's been kind of weird. But just yesterday, they formally revealed the literal rollout schedule for this feature update. Yep. Of course, they did it via a tech community blog post that had nothing to do with Windows 11. But you know what? Let's not worry about that. The point is, someone from Microsoft went on record.
Right.
So, good. So, as expected, it will be available next Tuesday, which is week D, right? Mm-hmm. In preview form, 24H2, that is. And then the following Patch Tuesday, which I believe is October 8, it will start rolling out publicly and stable, right? So everyone can get it. If you want to go get it, you can go get it. If you want to wait for it, you'll get it, assuming your computer is compatible and supported, I guess, would be the way to say that. As you guys know, especially Richard, who's witnessed this mania firsthand. I've spent a lot of this year obsessing over this release and what it will, include. And now that I know, a little disappointing, a little bit of a letdown.
That's not important, really. No.
It's like when you know where your present is hidden, and you go and you look at it every day, and then when you
finally get to open it. Yeah,
is that it? That's what it was.
It always was that.
Yeah,
I'm still firmly in the camp that there was an exclusivity deal with Qualcomm until November, and because that would be the 6-month window, and it's impaired the update process that they probably didn't think through. That is like, this is kind of a problem.
I also agree with that. So this is the weird year that we had 2 major milestones for a single feature update release. They did, of course, add some new features between the initial release, which is that Copilot Plus PC release in June, although technically in May, right? They finalized it in May. They put it on all the computers, shipped it out in the world, and they said, hold on a second, we gotta take a recall out of there with a blunt instrument, like that guy getting a lobotomy in Planet of the Apes. And they did that, and then you get this weird day one update, which we'll talk about a little bit more later in the show, because that weird day one update is also occurring on Copilot Plus PCs from AMD and Intel. Right. Interestingly.
Well, and therein lies the other side of this, is now that there are going to be other Copilot Plus PCs.
Yeah.
And curiously, I literally earlier this morning recorded a show about Windows Update and Copilot Plus PCs.
Interesting. Do you mind me asking with whom?
Or is that Aria Hansen.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Nee Carly. She got married in June.
Yeah.
But and it's not coming out till October. Sorry, I'm always ahead. But she was pretty good about what can we talk about when it's publishing in October versus right now.
That's
we're still
interesting.
in transition. So.
I wrote a little article about some of the top level features, right? It's not much. It's really not much. I mean, to me, the biggest thing is when you right click on something and you get that menu, you can see the names of cut, copy, paste instead of some weird Egyptian hieroglyphic that nobody understands.
I'm going to push back here on this. I think you need to set up a 23H2 machine and actually do a 20, because you've been living in 24H2 for so long. I don't think you can see it anymore.
So that's actually fair. It's true, is what it is. And the reason I said that is because in my kind of guise as consumer advocate, I'm thinking of normal people like my wife, right? Who would right click on something and then stare at that thing for 30 seconds, before she thought to mouse over something. And, she just doesn't think like this, right? She's smart. She's arguably smarter than I am. In fact, a lot of people tell me that fairly regularly. But she would not understand that interface, does not understand that interface. So for people like her,
my emotional reaction to the context menu is I right click, I curse because I can't find anything, and then go to the icons.
Yes.
Right. Literally, you've now built in a right click curse into the system. Like, is this the UX intent? Like, is this where you wanted to go? I swear at you constantly now.
Yeah, I do the same actions over and over again, and I have the same bad results over and over again, right? So the big one from the original Windows 11 was right-click taskbar. Oh, there's no task manager. And then over time,
that was the
I eventually
rage.
learned. Yeah, and I know of other ways, right? Windows key X, you could sit in the menu, whatever. And so I learned one of those, got used to it, and then they put it back because they're screwing with me. It's obvious that this is not 80% of Windows UI development is screw with Paul. But I this summer have been working on that programming project with WPF, which we'll discuss very briefly. I don't want to harp on this too much, but because I have to switch constantly between dark and light mode to make sure it looks right in both places, right? I actually wrote an app to just do that switch because it's like 3 levels deep, and I'm with this. It's like, why is that so hard? It's weird to me anyway. Yeah. So there's a lot of we deal with a lot as Windows users. I don't think that's too surprising, but but what I wanted to say was as far as like things maybe they're not talking about yet or whatever, I think the biggest and best improvements in 24H2 are actually under the covers, right? Massive performance improvements for AMD-based systems, especially those new Zen 5 machines.
Right.
There's a new updating style, which I'm sure that person talked about on your podcast, and we can all hear about, where cumulative updates. It's really funny. This never occurred to me, but when you hear the notion of cumulative updates, it sounds good, right? We used to have service packs, and service packs were good too, but then when you go a couple of years between service packs, that thing becomes humongous. And now we have like these monthly cumulative updates. And so because they're cumulative, no matter if you skip 3 months and you install a new one, you don't have to install the previous 3. You just get the one, and it's really nice. Until they wait 2 years to update the damn system. And then the cumulative updates get humongous. So now they have this differential cumulative update, which isn't the right name. But and you hear that and you go, yeah, that's great. That's great. And I'm sure we'll find a problem on this. And then 25H2 will fix that. Who knows? But it's this kind of never-ending series.
But you are very much talking the consumer update process, like over on the biz side with WSUS and so forth. We approach it differently.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And then, I mean, one of the conversations we had was separating the sort of cosmetic functionality updates from the security patches, where, because often when I'm talking to admins, they're like, I need to tech support this thing, so I don't like it when the search box moves. Like, that costs me money in tickets.
Yep.
So they do spend more time evaluating that, where now we're seeing very much when it comes to security patches, you shouldn't wait. You should just push them. The chances of them being problematic are low, not zero, but low. But the risk is high.
And now we're letting CrowdStrike handle that, so they're perfect. No worries there.
Oh boy, that might have come up in the conversation.
Yeah, I bet. No, I like that. This decoupling of things, which, one big example is the decoupling of UWP functionality from specific Windows 10 versions at the time, coming out with the Windows App SDK. You hear it and you say, yeah, right. I mean, it should always be like this. And just from an updating perspective, 100% what you just said. Yeah, we should, those monthly security updates, those should just go out. And then as an administrator, IT pro, whatever, you have some decision-making to do on specific feature changes.
Sure.
Right? Good.
100%.
That's good.
And that's
all good
that's
stuff.
Exactly when I'm sorry I'm burning up the whole show, because I have a very cool show for today. It's just not.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about it again. This stuff's important. So yeah, from a high level perspective, especially since 22, 23H2, 24H2 are, functionally nearly identical or are identical in some cases.
Yeah.
A lot of people I think are going to upgrade to this thing and be like, what's new? But
and
a lot of it's
was reminding me that the 22 was an OS update. 23 was a feature set,
like an enablement package,
right? An enable package. 24 is an OS update. I'm talking to the lady who builds it, so I'm not going to argue with her. I'm not equipped.
Yeah,
right.
I was going to say, based on how much time a brand new PC will sit there installing this thing, yes. Yes.
Well, but also I think was totally derailed by ARM.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I sometimes, look, we debate this recall thing. We go back and forth on that. But whatever happened, and they look, they had to kind of reach into it and say, all right, we got to pull stuff out here. There's a bunch of leftover junk in the form of, random registry keys that don't do anything, et cetera, et cetera. That's Windows, right? This is the mess. But I think the silver lining to that kind of thing is that Microsoft as an organization can look at this and say, look, we need to be able to do this kind of thing in a slightly more elegant fashion, maybe. Yeah. So perhaps we're going to see some benefits from that.
Feature flags by default, boys. Like, you need it. Yeah. You need to be able to shut it off and not be able to.
Yeah, so, we'll all benefit in the end from that. That's good. Well, all right. Not you as a Windows 11 home user, but most of us.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's that. Nothing huge going on there. I'm gonna skip past the PC thing real quick, just
because talk about new hardware, but okay. Yeah.
Well, because this just ties into what we were just talking about. So part of the confusion this year is that we have this Windows 11 feature update, right? Capital F, capital U.
Yep.
Major version upgrade that has been delivered in 2 different milestones. From a sort of mainstream perspective, the only way most people would get it back in June would be buying a Snapdragon X PC, which Microsoft branded as a Copilot Plus PC and added several on-device hardware accelerated NPU-based AI functions, none of which were particularly compelling.
No, because the compelling one got pulled.
The compelling one got pulled. It's surprising to me there wasn't more, frankly, but yep, that's what we have. Nothing has changed since then there. We still don't have recall, but now AMD Zen 5 chips are out. The Intel Lunar Lake stuff is out. Yep. Those PCs are starting to appear in the world. And one of the big questions we had all summer was like, okay, but will these things be called Copilot Plus PCs? Will they be just AI PCs that get Copilot Plus PC functionality because they meet some kind of a spec? So we got that clarity at IFA a couple weeks ago. They will be called Copilot Plus PCs. They are not getting those features immediately. They're going to get them in November, like you said. Hilarious. So I can confirm, and I knew this already, but now that I've gotten one as well, I saw this at the show. I think I told the story a couple of times. I got someone at some place came over to me as I'm typing on a computer. So what you doing? And just nothing. What do you mean?
Nothing.
Me?
Well,
I didn't even type. What do you mean? Just looking to see what was going on there. So 24H2 on all those computers, none of the Copilot Plus PC features. Those are coming later. And then I've gotten one since. We'll talk about that in a second. But yes, you get that day one Ubi update thing, which, takes 15, 20, maybe more minutes.
Wow.
It takes a while. Yeah. They give you kind of a nice looking screen to kind of deal with while it's happening. But it's
I got gigabit Ethernet and SSDs, and you're still going to take 20 minutes. That's something.
Yeah. But in looking, I guess the way to kind of say this is that, like we said earlier, everyone will have the ability to get 24H2 by the end of October that wants it or can get it. And then, by the end of the year, I think we're all going to be on the same page. So if you have a capable PC, you'll have the Copilot Plus PC stuff. We should have, hopefully, recall in preview by that point. And I'm sure next year will be nothing like this year and will totally make sense.
Everything will be fine. It's going to be fine.
Everything will be fine.
It's really going to be fine. I'll tell you, I'll put a stake in the ground here and say, this workstation, this video workstation, is due for a rebuild.
Oh, well, there you go. 24H2 is the ideal time.
It's got some Gen 11 hardware in it.
Yep.
So my goal will be to build by hand, new chassis, a Copilot Plus PC.
Nice. And do you know yet whether? Well, I guess you should wait and see how these things fall out.
I'm going to see what motherboard I can lay my hands on. Right?
You'll are you doing this, and are you putting it on video the whole way through? And where can people?
He says suggestively.
Like I want to see every step of this.
Fine. I'll put the stake in this too. Then we will do it on Discord. We'll do it for the Twit Club.
All right, that's fine.
I'll have this camera. I got the other camera pointed down. We'll set up the rig.
You are speaking my language.
And you got to understand, I'm very OCD about building machines. I've been building computers for 30-something years.
I think when one is OCD, you just end the sentence at OCD. So you would say, I am very OCD, period. And we just leave it at that.
And to be clear, I'm abusing the term. I'm really not that stressed. But you will watch me be very particular.
That's like saying, I can make fun of Polish people because I'm Polish. I can make fun of OCD because, no. But if I was, I could. And if I have OCD, I can make fun of OCD. It's fine. No. I'm just making fun of myself.
I like my machines last a long time.
No, I'm not Polish. Thank God, right? No, I'm just kidding.
I gotta go.
You scared him once you're done.
But you're going to do it. You're doing a desktop. So the choices you're going to have are going to be Arrow Lake on the Intel side, which is the desktop class H whatever series chips. And then I can't remember the AMD Zen 5. It's like probably an AI. I think I want to say 9000 or something. The AI 300 is the laptop, and then I can't remember the numbering for the desktop. But you'll have some choice there. So it'll be interesting to see where those fall.
Yeah, no, and that's the whole thing. Like, I have no idea when I'm going to do this. I know this machine should be rebuilt. It's getting to about that point. School's going back in, so most likely I'm going to take all this old hardware and help a student who needs a machine build their own machine from those older parts. It's a great way to repurpose it. It makes me super happy. Yeah, we just replace all the spinning, all the fans, power supply, all that stuff gets replaced. New drive in a new chassis, but the motherboard, chipset, processor, all that will just stay together.
I have to say, Richard, I wrote up an article, one in a series of articles. I could just title these things Paul's AI Confusion 2024, but
nice.
The latest one, though, I went back to the original Microsoft announcements from May about Copilot Plus PC, just to kind of see how the language went.
I pulled that blog post today.
Funny, I thought of you.
Simpatico.
Okay, interesting. So I was thinking of you when I wrote. I quoted this, and I was looking forward to reading this to you now because I don't really remember this. But when they announced that Copilot Plus PC was going to be Snapdragon X based for the first wave, right, as they called it, they did say in the future we will see devices based on these new AMD and Intel silicon chips, right? However, beyond that, this is the part that I blocked this. You didn't block it out.
It wasn't important.
Right? Well, it isn't. Well, when you hear it, you're going to say, okay, actually, this is important because you've been kind of complaining about this thing yourself all year. In the future, we expect to see devices with this new AMD and Intel silicon paired with powerful graphics cards like NVIDIA GeForce RTX and AMD Radeon, bringing Copilot Plus PC experiences to an even broader audiences, including advanced gamers and creators.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and this ties into this orchestrated thing that I've been talking about, where I think that Microsoft has moved so quickly on AI that there are parts of the company that just can't keep up, and one of them is Windows. That it's Windows that should be able to handle that orchestration of where AI tasks are run, and it will dynamic. This is the hardware abstraction layer. What kind of hardware do we have? Oh, an MPU, good. Those things work great. On that, we'll use that. But if you don't have that, well, you have this honking GPU, perhaps, or whatever it might be. We'll run them on that, and that maybe someday this will even extend to the hybrid AI stuff, where obviously some tasks are just better done or only done in the cloud, right?
Yep.
So I think we're going to get there. But like I said, I read that and I said, man, this is what Rich has been asking for. And interestingly, they mentioned it in the throwaway line at the bottom of a blog post
ages ago,
that no one was going to see. And if I saw it, I forgot it, but there it is. So.
But there it actually is. And I totally agree. Like that's going to have to be the mix. The other part of this, as an old hardware driver guy too, is like, what's the ODBC for the NPUs? Like what do I got to do to run these? And what if I have different chipsets? Like they've got to make sure that abstraction makes sense. And I haven't gotten good answers there either, but that's pretty down in the weeds for most folks. I
also believe that .NET would be an excellent choice as an orchestrator for this kind of behavior.
Oh, without a doubt. And this is what having a runtime does for you.
Yep. So I'm kind of looking. Every time there's an announcement from that group, I look at it. Is there anything in there? Because they have their set of functionality they're doing for 9, and it is what it is.
And they've got their libraries like ML.NET, right?
Yep.
Like you got to tell me ML.NET automatically runs on an MPU. And then the question is, how are you doing that? Like, how do you invoke the hardware you don't own? This should run over here.
Yep. That's to me is an excellent function for the .NET runtime. I hope that's how that works.
Well, and if you look at it from a GPU perspective, it's been things like DirectX, right?
Yep.
And DirectX was a workaround for the fact that Windows didn't cope with it. Although since Vista, it has. Which,
if I'm not mistaken, that work actually came out of DirectX, right? So in kind of a virtual cycle type of thing. But okay.
Although it went through a few different phases.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking for straight lines. I'm just looking for destinations.
Look, there's a whole thing going on here where Microsoft is trying to raise its own profile because they're doing the AI stuff. They want to lower costs, and one of the many strategies they have for that is get as much as they can off of the cloud. Unfortunately, the offerings they've put on the client so far haven't been particularly compelling, but there will be third-party solutions in the form of creator apps like video editors, et cetera, that I think will benefit greatly. But yeah, I mean, eventually we're going to get past those kind of premium, ultra-thin laptops, and that we don't call Ultrabooks anymore for some reason, even though it's a great name.
Yep.
And we're going to have to start hitting these other form factors. And, Christian Amann and the other guys at Qualcomm have alluded to this or even stated it explicitly. But, here in that Microsoft quote, you can see the beginnings of, this is the thing we've been talking about, which is AI PCs or Copilot Plus PCs will just be PCs and PCs broadly, right? Not just one class of PC, but whatever types, including this desktop thing you're going to make.
This is the same push going back to the 2000s with getting GPUs, right? That everybody needs a GPU. We will emulate the GPU with a CPU, but it'll be horrible. And now everybody has GPUs. Heck, they're on the motherboard.
This was aside from all the drama leading up to the release of Windows Vista, and there were complaints about compatibility, I know, but the big thing
and the drivers were a catastrophe.
Yep, was this Aero Basic UI that they would give you if you didn't have a graphics card, which a lot of people didn't at the time, that could handle Aero Glass. And eventually Intel got there with their integrated graphics where it was just okay, but forced you to buy a new computer. That made people upset. This is the cycle, so.
And here we are again.
Yep. Same thing. So we'll get there. It's not going to help PC sales this year from all the indicators I've seen, but I don't know. I guess 2% growth is still growth.
I'm having this conversation with sysadmins right now where they're like, I don't feel like I want to buy this generation of machines because I need to keep them for 5 years.
And maybe the first gen isn't the time to buy in.
It's not the one, right? It's like, should I stretch another year, buy a lower end machine for this wave, and then next year's wave maybe something better,
or ride it out with Windows 10 extended support maybe, or there's there's different options, I guess. But
but reality is it's this time next year, right, that we have to start talking about extended support. So everybody's planning right now what their orders are for next year.
I hope they have 1 year left if they're on 10.
But this is where you're literally, this is the budget. Here's how we're allocating what we're going to turn.
A lot of people believe this was going to be the year for that upgrade cycle.
Believe me, I'm still not convinced that day doesn't slip again. Right? Like I'm really not.
I know. Yeah, I agree with you on the first gen of anything is a dicey proposition.
Yeah.
I mean, if you bought into the first gen AI PC, you would have gotten a Meteor Lake PC with an NPU that can only run some of Windows Studio Effects and nothing else.
Right. Well, said the guy with the Studio 2.
Yeah. We didn't know. We didn't know. Spent a lot of money. This is part of the problem with how fast things have moved. I don't think Microsoft knew. Microsoft made that computer. I don't think that they've never been so far on the leading edge that they left people behind. They're usually on the other side of that, right? I mean,
so let's face it. If I had I got the machine last October.
Yeah.
If it would only be now, really, that I would be getting a different machine. Right? I mean, in theory, I could have ordered one in June, but that would have been a tough daily driver.
Yep.
So I wasn't wrong that it was time to replace that machine. Like it's going to be fine, but next year is going to be tricky.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. We'll see. Intel and AMD both have these slightly elevated top scores compared to Snapdragon. Snapdragon V2 is coming out. And we'll see where everything goes. I don't anticipate, and I pray to God we don't see, next year it's like top scores in the 60s or 70s, then goes up to 100. It's like, can we just keep it here for a while?
I have heard noises that the 40 number is going to stay for another couple of years.
Yeah,
that will be faster, but that the coding spec
but the actual spec will stay the same. That makes sense to me. To me, the only real question is whether there's a V2 spec or if we just move on, and say, look, we don't even need this anymore. This is a PC.
Yeah. No, I think we're a couple of years from that yet.
Yeah.
But that was the same when we were getting into GPUs.
Yep.
Right. So it takes time to get into the pipeline to the point where every motherboard has it, and then you have a better one if you need a better one.
Yeah.
Right? The same way every motherboard has a video card on it now, just not a great one. And if you want a great one, then you tie up a PCIe slot.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it took a long time. I mean, depending on where you were in life, hardware accelerated graphics either meant, Quake in 1996. Maybe it meant Windows Vista a decade later, right? Certainly by the time Windows 7 came out, that was just a common component. I mean, Windows 7 did, of course, have an Aero Basic mode as well. But I would say by that year, 2009, 2010, I think that, the shift had occurred. I mean, how long did the shift 32-bit to 64-bit take, right? The first 64-bit version of Windows Client probably came out in 2000.
That was XP?
3, 4, something like that on XP. Yep. And then Vista 7, 8, I almost said 9, and 10 were all 32 and 64. So it wasn't until Windows 11 in 2020, right? 2021, whatever year that was, that we were only 64-bit. So there's that's 20 years.
20 years, yeah. Well, and you think back to, you said hardware abstraction layer, and I immediately thought to Alpha, MIPS, and Power PC, right? Which ended in 2000.
It also ended in tears. But yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, right. I mean, the 90s were all about, what we now think of as alternate platforms. I guess it's possible any of them could have taken off, but that didn't happen.
No.
Okay. So I did get the my first review unit. It's a Zen 5 machine. So this is the HP Omnibook Ultra. So it kind of sits at the top of their consumer line for portables. It's a not particularly compelling looking device. It's got pretty big bezels. It's kind of chunky. It's kind of heavy. It's gray. It's not like a Dragonfly type of thing that's going to call out and be like, oh, look at this thing. It's awesome looking.
It's like a muslin laptop, right? That you make your sample suit from.
Yes, it's right. If you don't want to be noticed on the plane,
there you go.
You whip this thing up. But the thing is, it does have this Zen 5 thing going on, and a really high end chip as well. So 32 gigs of RAM, 2 terabytes of SSD storage.
So it's a sleeper.
Yeah. And actually, I kind of respect that, right? That's my kind of thing. So, broad strokes, it's really good. I only got it, I guess, technically yesterday, right? So I don't have a lot of data, and it's not fair for me to say this, but I'm going to. I woke up this morning and I opened a lid and it did not turn on. So for example, it looks like the battery life is going to be very good. I don't know. I can't.
What's up with that corner cut though?
Yeah, so this is something that dates back to the Spectre X360s, right? Which will be renamed. So the next gen Spectre X360 will be the machine under this. And so like an Omnibook X Flip, I think is the nomenclature now instead of X360. Right. But the theory at the time was they had gone to a really sharp-edged kind of design style, which looked good, but could also be a little tough on the wrists and stuff. And then someone at HP had the idea, we've got these sharp corners in the back. Why don't we chop them off? We could put a USB port there, right?
Right.
So there was a gen or two where the other side had the power button, and that side had one of the USB-C ports. And that way, it kind of slightly obviates one of the complaints when you have all the USB on one side, which is if you're right-handed, that's where all the cables are coming off. So you're charging it, and now you can't, it's in the way. So it gets it out of the way by angling it out the back. So I like that. But goofily, the other side, the one you can't kind of see right there, there's nothing there. It's just an angle. It's like an angled, just chopped off the corner there. So I kind of wish that they had put something there. Like
you put the power button there, so when you go to reach for your USB key and grab it the wrong way, you sleep the machine.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So anyway, it's okay. But yeah, the performance on this thing is fantastic. And I am also concurrently looking at it's a Meteor Lake U series, which is garbage. And I did the same thing 2 mornings in a row, but on the 2 different computers. I think the first one is still working on it. And the AMD one was like, bing, 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 done. And it's like this big Visual Studio thing. And it was like really nice. I've loaded up a bunch of games. Those all run fantastically. And so this is another, this is an advance over that little laptop we talked about probably last month. Yeah. As far as the graphical quality of it or performance, it's really good. So yeah, this is the double-edged sword of the PC industry. We got all this choice, and you can kind of optimize for what's most important to you. I based on Ryan Trout and others I talked to at IFA, whatever it's called, IFA. Intel and AMD aren't going to have quite the efficiency battery life of Snapdragon, but they're going to be in the ballpark.
Yeah.
But they are going to have the performance, and they're going to have the compatibility, of course, the 100% compatibility. So
I'll leak another word from Aria, which she says she's running on a Snapdragon machine. She says, I went to work for a full 8-hour day without my power bar, without my power supply, and in Teams almost the whole day.
Right.
And the battery made it.
Yeah, and that stuff's good because a lot of Teams will run off the NPU, I bet, for the video stuff at least.
I think a lot of Teams just runs in Electron and sucks down the power like nobody's news.
No, that's true. It's better than it was. I don't know.
But you talk about meaningful thresholds, right? Yep. A meaningful threshold is I worked a day without my power brick.
Yeah. Oh,
that's a meaningful threshold.
I agree, 100%. Yep. Yeah, it's still not quite MacBook Air territory, but in the ballpark, as I say now, it's there. Yeah.
That's exciting.
And we'll see with this one. I think it's going to be. It looks. I mean, I can't. It's been a day, right? I can't really say. Does have Windows Hello ESS. This is the more advanced form of Windows Hello required for recall, but also this emerging spec that's sort of like TPM chips. Back when Longhorn and then Vista was happening, were sort of, unusual, and that another thing that took a while to come in. But now all PCs have these things. We have secure boot, et cetera. Yeah. Something I think that's just going to transform the security landscape for the PC.
Well, and I think it's one of the strengths of Windows ARM. Like if I, again, in my min role, talking to these guys, it's like, hey, you know how we have a wrestling match about TPM and all that? You know what you don't have a wrestling match on? Pluton. You don't have a choice. They only come one way.
Yes. Although I don't know enough about this to speak intelligently to it, but Intel, if you watch that presentation I referenced a bunch last time, talked about how they also put their own thing on there. So it's Pluton and Intel something, and it's like, guys, seriously. But God love them. They're trying. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is, Microsoft's like, look, we're going to push this thing through. It got some pickup before this, but now with Copilot Plus PC, it's a requirement, and it's part of that broader Windows Hello ESS, the underlying security compliance stuff that I think is so important. So, good. Anyway, so I'll check in again. We're going to Mexico in about 2 weeks, and
nice.
With a stop in Dallas on the way. But this will be one of the computers I bring with me, and we'll see. I have high hopes, but realistic expectations, I guess. We haven't actually talked about this one in a while, but 2024 especially, but I would say even since the release of 23H2, so maybe from September last year on, so for 1 year now, has possibly been the biggest year ever, or biggest 12-month span ever for Microsoft deprecating features in Windows. And it's actually been a few months that we've seen anything major. It's certainly been a few months since I've written about it, but they just announced the other day a kind of a sweeping set of legacy DRM services, which all date back to Silverlight, Windows 7.
Wow.
The classic Windows Media Player, probably those Play for Sure type, services we would have had back in that era, are all being deprecated then.
2009, 2010. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of this, I'm sure, is even earlier than that, really.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, so some of the stuff that's a little more, well known, I guess, that's been deprecated, like the Steps Recorder, WordPad is one people often point to, but there's been some underlying stuff too. NTLM, Direct Access, which dates back to Windows Server 2003 R2 or whatever that was called. I think. Stuff like that has all also been deprecated in the past year, and I like to see Microsoft be a little more aggressive on this stuff. This is something they've not always done particularly well, so that's nice to see. And then I just didn't know where to stick this, so to speak. Also, the name of and I clicked. I guess I clicked on the wrong link there too. But or I have the wrong link. But Android 15 has been finalized. Google does quarterly feature drops on Pixel, so you'll see that like I do. And then they release interim Android capabilities as well on whatever basis, right? And one of those is going to be this windowing capability in Android 15 post-launch. So if you have a tablet, you'll be able to do what you can do now on Chrome OS, which is determine whether an app is run full screen or windowed. And if it's windowed, whether it's snapped side by side, or if you can stretch it out and arbitrarily resize them. Android's a little bit the Wild West when it comes to that kind of capability, unfortunately. Yeah. But because of folding devices, because of tablets, especially Pixel tablets, Google's been trying to push this for the past few years, and it's getting better. So it's not perfect, but they're starting to do more of that. So that's kind of interesting. This is kind of a, because we have these capabilities in Windows that we probably don't think too much about, but Mac, the latest version of Mac OS just added a snap-like capability. Chrome OS literally just added a snap-like capability. Android is getting this windowing and basic side-by-side, not real snap, but basic side-by-side capability. That took a long time. I mean, this stuff has been in Windows since, some of it's Windows 8, even Windows 7, I think.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
The good stuff didn't happen until probably Windows 11. We have, snap groups and snap layouts and all that stuff now. So it's still more sophisticated, but these competing platforms are starting to wake up, I guess, and get there. So that's happening.
It's cool, though. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I think so. All right. That's it for Windows. Micah, Where are we? Oh, my phone is full.
It is time for us to take a quick break. My little shortcut buttons weren't working. I'm sitting M, and I was just typing M's into the chat room. So I'm here now, and I want to tell you about BetterHelp, who are bringing you this episode of Windows Weekly. We were just talking about therapy. Let me ask you a question. What's something that you would love to learn? Is it gardening, maybe, or a new language, or maybe how to finally beat your best friend in bowling? Certainly for me, that's one of them. It seems like every time I roll that ball, it's just a random thing each time. Sometimes I do very well, sometimes I don't. Anyway, as an adult, question is, if you make time to learn new things as often as you'd like, or was that something that you lost in childhood? Kids are always learning and growing. They're like sponges. But as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. Therapy can help you reconnect with that sense of wonder because your back to school era can come at any age. I have in the past made use of online therapy. I've talked about that plenty on this show, that is my means of getting therapy, and it's always been a very helpful thing. Going in person can sometimes mean getting stuck with a person who doesn't quite line up with what you're looking for. And being able to easily move on to a new provider that is better for you it's very freeing, and it makes the experience better because you are matched with someone who, as the kids say, matches your vibe. And I think that's one of the great benefits of something like BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, why not give BetterHelp a try? It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. That's another big thing. You may have a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 8, who knows? And so finding some time to actually meet with a therapist that's on your schedule is great too. You fill out a brief questionnaire that'll get you matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/windows today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/windows. Alrighty, we are back from the break, and that means it is time to talk about Microsoft 365.
We make New Year's resolutions. I have made an episode resolution that I'm going to correctly unmute myself every time we come out of the ad. So
far, so good.
1 for 1. That's all I'm saying.
I'm very proud of you. You're sticking to those resolutions.
Pretty sure you were unmuted while you were pouring the water.
God damn it. Well,
I was about to say, what's going on?
Hold on. I unmuted it early, realized I had done that, and then remuted and re-unmuted. So
yeah.
I apologize.
It's all right.
I can't. The stuff that happens during the ad, that was not part of the resolution. Okay.
That's fair. That wasn't your territory.
Yeah.
That was on me.
Look, I can only control so much here. Sorry.
All good.
So, Richard, I'm hoping you know more about this than I do, because I spent yesterday in I guess state of confusion is kind of my new thing, but Microsoft announced what they had referred to previously, and I think maybe during the event as well, or virtual event, as the Wave 2 of Copilot innovation. Right before they went out with this, Slack showed up and said, "Hey, look at me! We have stuff too." Slack. And Slack, right? So Slack already has some basic AI capabilities. Slack has an app model similar to Microsoft Teams, probably not as sophisticated. I don't know or care, frankly, but there's something in there. And half an hour, I think, before the Microsoft thing went live.
Wow.
They're like, hey, we're going to have this new thing. We're integrating with third parties. So it kind of sits somewhere between like a true Slack-based app and then a first-party AI service. But we're working with companies like Adobe and others to create what we're calling a term Microsoft had used for years and years until they came up with Copilot, agents, right? AI agents that will act on your behalf. And these things can work off of your company's data. They can work internally, et cetera, et cetera. You're like, okay, nice. And then Microsoft 30 Minutes came out and said, hey, remember we used to call those things custom GPTs or custom Copilots? Yeah, we're going to call them agents again. Just kidding. So they're all agents. And honestly, in the same way that Copilot
terms.
Yeah, it's a pretty good term. It's one, if you're in the Microsoft space, agent, bot, I guess these are, kind of go back and forth a little bit, but it feels familiar, I guess. The two things that struck me about these announcements, these were all for the business end, right? So it's not really my purview per se, but a lot of this is going to come to Copilot Pro on the consumer side, et cetera, et cetera. Although they did strip away that custom GPT capability. Remember, that used to be there earlier this year. So lots of stuff, right? This is the ongoing theme with Microsoft and AI. It's like, like lots of stuff. But it also seems slightly less dramatic, by which I mean, you kind of go through the list of what they did and you're like, yeah, okay. Like it, like this just, it's almost like they got the message from Apple and they're like, maybe we need to be a little more pragmatic here.
Yeah.
So what do you have any?
I do. Coincidentally, last week I was running my Next Gen AI conference. So I had Eric Boyd, who's the CVP in charge of AI experience for Microsoft, as a keynote. And he dug directly into that. In fact, he brought one of his senior engineers along, and they were demonstrating some of these more advanced, what they called agenic systems.
I'm sorry. Did you say hygienic?
Agenic.
Agenic.
Agents.
Not eugenic.
Not eugenic, which is a little entirely cold, but they use the term agenic system.
Okay.
The funny thing is, like, everybody I've talked to who's trying to get a GPT to deploy is effectively building this themselves because they're constantly struggling with quality prompts and quality responses. They are building a test harness around that so that they now evaluate the response, do it again. And when they walk through this whole experience, what they call maker checker patterns.
Yeah.
So what's happened with the shift in the tooling now is to sort of describe the policies of the company, like, hey, we make equipment for warfare, so we're going to use these terms you would normally squash, or that kind of stuff, along with the idea of stimuli being not just a handwritten or typed in prompt, but might be an incoming email or some other event in the system, kicking off one of these agenic systems that then does a generation cycle, checks it, modifies it, and iterates X many times.
This is actually
until it passes a threshold.
Yeah, common app model, really. I mean, just
not
applied to. Yeah,
not that weird at all. Except that what you're doing is you're coping with this non-deterministic behavior of these machine learning models. Like I've done a bunch of shows on the Run S side. We're just talking with the old school machine learning folks. It says you test, and then you deploy, right? But it's this point of we test to the point of consistency, of reliability. We don't worry about testing once it's in the field. And this approach seems to admit that as long as you're using the software, it's self-testing. Like it's constantly reevaluating itself and running again so that it can tolerate ongoing change. So the keynote was an hour long, but a lot of that was the preamble of here's how we positioned ourselves and so forth. But really that last 10 minutes, which was all about the tuning of the prompts and managing jailbreaking and applying company policy so that now you can use this automated iterative method, which, and I got to think the person that was in the audience that's way down this path building their own just went, wasted so much time.
Well, this is the AI is the grenade in the room, because before, I don't know, February 2023, I guess, that is how Microsoft used to talk about these things. It was ML, it was bots, it was, and you would sit through keynotes at whatever event and say, okay. And it wasn't particularly exciting, but they came out really strong, too strong, maybe in some ways. So
no, and it speaks to the tooling has been significant. They've literally rethought the architecture, and so tooling's been rethought too. Product names have changed again.
I know.
And so,
I was worried they were going to change the name of Copilot, although I guess technically Microsoft 365 Copilot, they've gone back to that original name,
as opposed to Copilot for M365.
Yeah. Which is just silly. But it's funny, though, if you look at the individual, just the Office apps, aside from Agent Builder, a way to create these experiences, right? Which, whatever, kind of a dev type capability. If you look at what they are adding to Word, Excel, PowerPoint, the classic, Teams, Outlook, et cetera, you might be forgiven for wondering, was this already there?
Yeah.
How is this new? All of them have these abilities to summarize everything, right? So if you have, meetings or emails, we're going to summarize that stuff. Copilot for Excel is generally available. If you go back to the beginning of Copilot for Microsoft 365, which I guess technically was about almost a year ago, right? Mm-hmm. Seems like a million years ago. That was the one that wasn't kind of stable yet, but now it is. And then, just across the main apps. The one that has always been the most compelling to me, the one that has always spoken to what I think of as like the personal Microsoft Graph for individuals, is the Copilot in OneDrive, right?
Right.
The ability to have this thing, I assume it's going to take a while, like indexing a drive or something, examine the content in your OneDrive, and then use that as the grounding for future prompts about whatever topic, right? Because in my case, I have decades and decades of work archives in there, everything I've written, books, I often struggle to find my own content, right? Whether it's on the web or in my own archives. And to me, it would be really neat to, this is one I can't wait to see. So this is now available, but in the business end. So I gotta figure this one out, but it does exactly what you want. Natural language prompt, summarize, find files. Yes. Right. Thank you. So that's the one I'm excited about, but I don't know. The stuff that helps you write, the stuff that helps you make a PowerPoint presentation, I get it. I mean, and I appreciate it. I think those kind of helper things are probably how this stuff is really going to be defined, but I'm looking for something a little more profound, frankly.
I'll give him this. He brought an engineer who coded on the fly. In fact, that was a theme across the keynotes. Well, what's the complaint with these AI technologies? All of this is smoke and mirrors. It isn't real, right? And so I think they're listening enough to go, no, we're going to show you how we do it and what we're doing.
That's something they lost at their developer show up through build, probably 2005, I think. Live coding demos on stage.
They became because you can crash and burn too, right?
Yep, so. I know, but that shows a certain confidence that I love, and that audience loves. And after that, there were still live parts to it, but they were really just copy and pasting like blocks of code, and it was like, guys, come on.
I don't know if you've ever been in backstage of like a build or an Ignite or tech. They ever since the famous Bill Gates blue screen,
right?
They've always had a mirror. So there's another person doing the same demo at the same time that can be cut over to instantly.
Right.
And I've been there when they cut over, like as the demo was imploding, flip, and it was so quick, unless you were watching for it, you wouldn't even know.
Nice.
But it's what makes those freaking keynotes so expensive. Like literally you're duplicating everything, duplicating all the staff.
Right.
And they're that heavily scripted, which is the opposite of real, right? But I'm also very conscious. I mean, not my keynotes, but when you think about building Ignite keynotes, those things are for shareholders. They're not for customers.
Right. Well, New cycle driving, interest driving, investors.
I think purely, that's why they seem so bizarre, because they're for shareholders.
This is the big complaint about Apple. Like on their opening developer show, they'll have like this consumer keynote, and everyone's like, "What are you doing? Like, this is a developer show." And it's like, doesn't care about developers, guys, investors. So, no offense. We'll have your developer keynote tomorrow or later today, whatever it is. But we got to do the dog and pony thing.
And that's the thing. I like a day 2 keynote where you can, have somebody doing a little code, admittedly with plenty of guardrails. And in sessions, I think you should fly without as much as possible. It's what's fun. And heck, recovering from failure is 10 times more interesting anyway.
I live for those moments. I once forgot to turn off my phone. My phone rang. I looked at it and I said, "I'm sorry, I got to take this." Obviously I'm in the middle of giving a talk. I
was like two builds ago where Handsome had a handheld mic for some reason, and he was trying to type with one hand, and Scott Guthrie walked out on stage, just took the mic from him and held him, and then looked at him and said, I'm trying to provide value here.
I love it.
And wreck the room. Like it's what everybody remembers from that keynote now, is that moment where, the boss of all things shows up to hold the mic.
Plus the fact that I just upstaged you is like, frosting on the cake here. So,
hilarious. Yeah. Really
awesome. Yeah. What people will remember from your talk was me. Right. So that's in the Microsoft space, that's a win,
Especially when you're talking about a Scott Hanselman, who's like everybody's favorite keynoter these days.
Yeah. Which is interesting because he's a character, that
he
guy. Speaking of him, real quick, I just he has a podcast, Hansel Minutes, and he has an interview with a guy from Qualcomm about the ARM hardware and all this stuff.
Nice.
It's not very long. It's probably less than 30 minutes. Totally worth listening to. I kind of cherry pick his shows, but that's a good one. Recommend that. Okay, so we're not giving this Microsoft 365 Copilot stuff enough space, frankly, but there's almost too much going on there, and I'll probably spend a lot more time on it when we see what, if any, of this comes down to consumers. It's worth looking into. There's a ton of it. But on the flip side of this world, Microsoft also makes what I think they still refer to as the perpetual licensed versions of Office, and the latest version is now available for businesses. Long-term servicing channel, LTSC 2024. If you're kind of a Luddite or you have a specific need, a computer that can't be connected to the internet or needs to be on a PC that's unchanged for several years, whatever it might be. They don't want customers using this, but they see the demand, so they make these things. So every 3-4 years, whatever it is, they come out with a new version. I think 2016, 2019, and now 2024. So that's been the kind of cadence there. If you follow along with Microsoft 365 and all the new features are going to be like blasts from the past, like the new default theme that we've been using for 3-5 years, whatever, is one of the major new features in this thing. Some accessibility tools. You can like comments and replies in documents that you're collaborating on with others. Dynamic array support in Charge for Excel. It's like Excel now supports floating point math. It's like it's stuff from the past. But that's the point, right? You've got this thing that's kind of fixed in time. It's not going to change. It comes with very little in the way of new, and many things that are not included, like, the storage, the Copilot compatibility. Can't use that with that, et cetera. But, and multi-PC licensing is not available, right? So you put it on a PC or a Mac if you get that version, and that's where it stays, right? They're purposefully limiting it. There will be versions for consumers in the coming weeks, so those aren't available yet. But if you are a commercial customer, you can get that now.
Nice.
And I somehow don't have a link on this next article, but let me see if it's still in the cache here. There it is. So Microsoft last month, I think it was talking about how they were going to have a security summit with CrowdStrike and others in the industry with the goal of...
Rasinovich was running it, right?
Oh, I don't know. That's interesting. They want the industry to kind of agree on how we're going to move forward and not put everything in kernel mode.
Start using the APIs they provided you.
Yeah. So
I just love that staged photo.
Yeah. Here's the thing.
Hilarious.
First of all, I was told there was not a tarp in the room. So if you stepped in and you were like the guy from CrowdStrike, you didn't have anything to worry about there.
Nice. That's important.
That's important. It's good. Just for being certain you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But Microsoft put on a kind of a positive face to this. If you read this carefully, what you'll see two things. One is that they didn't really agree on anything other than changes need to be made. If you read the quotes from some of the people from the companies who were there, some of them are almost negative, right? So the ESET quote is the most interesting to me because that quote is not actually attributed to a human being. It's just an ESET quote. The other ones all have a person attached to them. Right. But it says, we support modifications to Windows that demonstrate measurable improvements to stability on the condition that any change must not weaken security, affect performance, or limit the choice of cybersecurity solutions. What that means is we don't want Microsoft to do what they usually do and just give itself capabilities that we can't have.
No, which I think is very fair, right? It's like...
It's fair.
Follow your own rules.
Okay, but it goes on. So I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. But it remains imperative that kernel access remains an option for use by cybersecurity products to allow who cares. I know, that's the problem. So David Weston, who I don't recall. I don't think I've met him personally, but I do. Yeah. I like the guy in kind of a remote way. He seems like a plain talker to me. Maybe I'm projecting there, but I always like to see his name on anything, and I like to see him speak as well. But he, thank you for meaningful, positive discussions, blah blah blah. But even he sort of talked about, look, we have these plans, we have ideas. I think Microsoft would, and the industry maybe and vaguely would like to move past this type of issue, but it may be just the way Windows is architected. It may not be. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, the whole problem is here, as long as you have that option, this is something that Linux pushed really hard on. It's like the only thing in the kernel is kernel code, kids. That's all there is.
Yep.
And Microsoft would have to be adherent to that.
But well, listen, here's the problem. This came up randomly, but it was as far ago as I believe it was NT 4.0. In fact, it was NT 4.0. Mm-hmm. They sort of compromised on that position that long ago. It was 30 years ago. Because NT was big and heavy and slow compared to mainstream Windows on x86 hardware. So they were looking at ways to speed it up. And one of the best ways they could find was to put the graphics subsystem in the kernel.
In the kernel, yeah. And then that's one of the things that bit us in Vista.
Yep. So, we've been kind of threading that needle ever since Windows was Windows, I guess.
Well, and the debate every time is, well, the machines are more performant. We don't need that. We can afford the performance hit now because we're that fast, right?
Yeah.
We have reliability. I would, and in the midst of the CrowdStrike thing, this all seemed very doable. Right. But now, a month or so on, people are past it, right? Folks in the Discord are commenting on that text saying this sounds like gobbledygook because it is.
Right.
They made the happy noises they need to have to say, we think security is really important. I think there's no intent to change anything. Not a chance. Yep.
I have to wrestle with my inner cynical being, but yeah, I 100% agree with that.
Well, and I mean, it's not like Microsoft doesn't have security initiatives going. SFI is going full swing, and it seems to primarily be impacting the folks that build demo apps out in the world, right, where they need to get secure identities right and all of that sort of thing. So it's not like there aren't security initiatives going on, but this pushing stuff out of the kernel mode, it's not the priority. It should be done, but there's not a CrowdStrike every week.
You're going to think I'm joking when I say this, but it's possible. It sounds naive, even as it comes out of my brain, that AI could help solve this problem in a sense. I mean, I think one of the big pushes for kernel mode is just this ability to act as quickly as possible.
Yep.
By analyzing signals and going after it. It seems like AI maybe is good at that, and
I think
maybe something. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, we don't look at these new large language models as performant technology.
That's true,
and certainly not stuff I want to. Not stuff I want to run in my kernel. For goodness sake.
Well, if you had an NPU in your server, what could go wrong?
Jeez,
I know. I'm sorry. I know. Even like I said, even as it was forming as ideas in my brain, I was fighting it.
Arguably the best way to secure Windows might be to abandon the Windows kernel and make Windows a shell over Linux.
You, sir, are a heretic, and I will see that you're burned at the stake for that. Yeah. No. I mean, that's come up a lot too, right, over the years.
I'm not saying anything original here. Like, that's an approach. It would also address the issues with networking. Like, there's a bunch of solves here. And for the most part, it doesn't matter anymore. Coding wise, we deployed a Linux on the cloud for a reason. It saves 20 to 30%.
That's right.
Like, there's no two ways about it.
Yep. And to your point earlier about just processors, computers being so fast now that it kind of obviates a lot of the old complaints. I always think back to the complaints about managed environments like Java or .NET, and the early 2000s. One of the big complaints there was the same thing. It was just like, look, you're sucking up cycles here with this runtime.
Yeah.
But today, so whatever runtime, whatever it is that this
we
Linux
tolerate Electron.
There you go.
Because of the
just tolerate it.
Compatibility of it. You don't have
rely on it.
It's everywhere. And it's a beast.
Yep.
But you know what? Because in the end, what's more important is reliability and consistency.
Yeah.
I'll go slower to work more reliably.
Yeah, and the slower that we're talking about is not even perceivably slower is the point. I mean, so that's a showstopper right there.
Anyway, no.
So we'll see. I've lost my whole train of thought, Richard. Thank you. So, what are we doing here? Oh yeah. So, just Apple. We talked about Apple last week. That stuff's happened. The iPhones are coming out this week. It was very interesting to me to watch the coverage of this stuff. Mainstream press, Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, whatever, tech press, etc. And once again, sort of mark the difference between this kind of spectrum of ways in which AI is being pushed out into the world. You've got Google and Microsoft at one end, just like, whatever. And then you've got Apple, like this scientist in a lab coat, just kind of like slowly metering it out. we'll see.
Still surprised they announced it. I think they had to. They were forced into it. They are now finding out what they committed to is way harder than they think.
There's no version of this story where Apple doesn't have a September event for iPhone. Could you imagine the ramifications of that?
Yeah, that's huge.
This thing will sink or swim, I guess, based on the quality of what they're doing. But it's notable to me that they shipped 5 or 6 whatever major platform OS releases. They're shipping new hardware, not across the whole board, but new iPhones, obviously, some other things, but Apple Watch, I guess. But it's big, and then also just the complexity of what they're doing. If you're in the beta program, public or private, you can test 18.1, 18.2. Like you have a choice of things. You can be in different spaces, and they're also supporting, on iOS, like iOS 17 point whatever, if you just want to get security updates. And so Apple has found themselves in a place that will be very familiar to your typical Microsoft IT admin. It's kind of interesting, right? They've turned into like this complex kind of provider of platforms. So there you go. Yeah. Anyway, that's happening.
I'm waiting for a knock on the door from Dave Cutler for my whole Linux as the kernel thing. Like, a very angry 80-year-old man's going to come through any moment now.
A very excited 80-year-old is going to say, well, I'm glad you mentioned this. This is actually what I've been working on for the past 4 years.
Kidding. I can't believe
never know.
That guy's still working. Like, it's his
I know. And his whole aim in life was to destroy Unix, right? Linux didn't exist at the time, or maybe it just started happening. But, certainly no, when he started NT, it didn't exist. So, his goal was, we are going to kill Unix. It's hard to say Unix. Like Linux just comes out of the mouth. But I don't know if he's softened at all. It doesn't appear to have much. If you've seen any of his recent,
no, he sent some videos and things. He's definitely still Dave Cutler.
Yeah,
but he's 80. He is 82, and he still goes to the office.
He could still kick the crap out of me. That guy is amazing.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Nothing but respect. And then I just wanted to throw this out here, not because I want to talk about my stupid app anymore, but because
because RC1 pushed.
RC1 pushed. And I look for, I can feel it coming, like I know when like in my brain, not logically, but just I can feel it. It's been a few weeks. I'm like, we're right on the verge of the next milestone. And ever since preview 4, obviously they did 5, 6, 7, and then now I think RC1. And every time I look and I'm like, oh, come on, it's got to be something. It's got to be something. It's got to be something. And there is nothing. And so it is now very clear to me that whatever lame capabilities I got back in May are it. And
what you have to question is what got pushed back, right? Yeah. What didn't make it? Because they know they're going every year, so they take bigger bites than they can ever hope to deliver, and then there's a pruning, in the sort of August timeframe for what they can actually deliver in November. So. You're right. What you see is what you get in RC1.
Yep.
Barring a catastrophe.
Yep.
This is it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And if there is a catastrophe, it's going to be less.
It's going to be less. It'll get pulled, not the other way around.
What we got as a WPF developer is better than zero by a wide margin. But my God, it's so incomplete. It almost makes it more frustrating. It almost would have been better if they did nothing, rather than raise our hopes. So anyway, I've been racing to document what I've done so far. I'm not going to talk about it in great detail, but
progress has been made, man.
Progress has been made. That's true. Yeah.
And then really that commit was only earlier this year. Like,
I know
the .NET 10 cycle will be the first very WPF centric cycle.
You better be right.
In the Maui context.
I spent so much time on this summer. I don't even want to think about it. It's just horrible.
I think that's on you, man. I really do.
Yeah, I think so too. We'd had an ad for some kind of a therapy thing earlier, I believe. Maybe I should look into that. I certainly need it. I think anyone who develops software probably needs some form of therapy. It's hard work.
Well, we are going to take a break, not for therapy, but for another.
It's like a therapy moment.
Yeah, you take your therapy break. I'll tell you about the next sponsor. It's Thinkst Canary, bringing you this episode of Windows Weekly. Thinkst Canaries are honeypots. These little devices that can be deployed in minutes. If someone is accessing your Lure files or brute forcing your fake internal SSH server, your Thinkst Canary will immediately tell you that you have a problem, and you don't have to worry about a bunch of false alerts. Just choose a profile for your Thinkst Canary device and register it with the hosted console for monitoring and notifications. And then you sit back and you wait. Attackers who have breached your network, malicious insiders, and other adversaries make themselves known by accessing the Thinkst Canary. Visit canary.tools/twit, and for just $7,500 per year, you will get 5 Thinkst Canaries, your own hosted console, upgrades, support, and maintenance. And if you use the code TWIT in the How Did You Hear About Us box, you'll also get 10% off the price for life. You can always return your Thinkst Canaries with their 2-month money-back guarantee for a full refund. And it's worth pointing out, during all the years Twit has partnered with Thinkst Canary, the refund guarantee has never been claimed. Visit canary.tools/twit and enter the code TWIT in the How Did You Hear About Us box. That is Thinkst Canary, and we thank them for sponsoring this week's episode of Windows Weekly. All right, back to the show, and we're getting into the hardware.
Yay.
I just have one thing to say. Suck it, haters. I did it again.
Woo!
I unmuted myself.
He's here. We can hear him.
Water poured or anything.
I am almost a fully functioning adult.
Yay.
Next
I could pass for a human being sometimes.
Maybe next up you'll get your lower third squared away. It'll be exciting.
Actually, the one thing I really got to do is figure out this link problem I have in Notion where I click on these links and it's like some other story. This happens way too much.
But the first part's always fine. It's later on. I think you're getting tired or something.
I don't think I know this sounds bizarre, but I don't think it's me. I think there's literally a right click bug in Windows. We talked about this a little bit, right?
It's possible.
I don't know. Anyhow, okay. So Intel, probably you've heard the news. They're not doing so great, but they've had some good news this weekend, some bad news too, but mostly good news, and that's a nice change. The good news was Pat Gelsinger met with his board of directors, and my belief is that Intel will almost certainly have to spin off this foundry business, and that this gets us into an interesting area where the thing that used to be Intel is now these two different things. And if it's successful, the foundry business is obviously the bigger opportunity, which I think is why they don't want to get rid of it, right? So what they've done is building off of the efforts they made several months ago to financially report the foundry business as if it were a separate company, right? They separated it out on their quarterly reports. They're actually going to formally make it a subsidiary, so its own company. Yep. Now, the leadership at the foundry business is not changing, and they do report directly to Pat Gelsinger, of course. But I think this separation of church and state is designed to do a couple things. It allows them to pursue their own funding separate from Intel, but it also maybe reassures some potential customers that the foundry is not going to share technical details of chip designs with the parent company kind of thing. I think that might be a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, the problem for me is this is what AMD did like 15 years ago with Global Foundries, and it was a catastrophe.
Right.
I mean, that's got to be weighing on Gelsinger's mind.
Yep. Right? Oh yeah. No. I look. Broad strokes and just speaking, vaguely from a high level, this plan for Intel to kind of reestablish itself as a chip maker and then sign on to build chips for other companies, that does make sense. I mean, we do need alternatives from a national security perspective. We talked about this. We need some in the United States, right, that are U.S. businesses. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, there's been mixed signals on how far along the company is with its next gen, what they call the 18A manufacturing process. Originally, Intel was going to do some of their Lunar Lake on that process and some third party through TSMC. They're doing all of it on TSMC. And then they were going to do all of Arrow Lake on their own, but now they're doing that. They're starting on TSMC, right? So that's not great.
And to me, there's two basic metrics here. It's does the foundry business get other customers, which sounds like that's what's happening, and does Intel start producing chips with a different foundry?
Yeah, so they've already. So that was. This would have been probably late last year. Gelsinger said, "Look, we while we're building out this capacity to stay on the leading edge, or to maybe get back on the leading edge, our own chip designs will be built by other companies are like, we're going to have to do that sometimes, right? So they're doing that, right? So if you get a Lunar Lake PC, that thing was built in Taiwan, or the chip was, right?
Yeah.
Or well, I should say part of it was, because actually they build the chip there, and then they send it to Intel, and Intel actually puts some of the stuff on top of it, if you will. So there's actually some manufacturing that occurs at Intel, like they put it in a box. No, there's a little bit more to it than that. But so, that's always been the kind of tough pill to swallow. The problem is, though, as time goes by and they're not reaching that capacity where they want to be, things look bad. But
then you throw in the CHIPS Act, which then looks like a bailout for Intel rather than what it was intended to be, which was to repatriate certain technologies.
Yep. So the total these numbers are kind of tough, and these are off the top of my head, but the total investment that Intel is putting into building out their chip fab capabilities is quoted as being about $100 billion. A chunk of that will come from the U.S. government in the form of loans and subsidies, right? And we've known about, I want to say, roughly 10 or 11 billion so far. Part of the good news this past week has been a further, I think it was up to $3 billion in direct funding from the CHIPS Act, right? For creating these leading edge kind of semiconductor fabricators in the United States, in Ohio specifically. So, it's a big bet, right? And the good news, the other piece of the good news is, so we've got the government putting in more. We've got AWS, who is already partnering with Intel on various chips, including special design Intel Xeon processors for their data centers.
Right.
They've chosen Intel to build what they're calling their AI fabric chips on this Intel 18A manufacturing process, right? So that's, look, a big American company betting on another big
American company
at a time when the U.S. government is looking at these big American companies, both negatively and positively. Maybe there's some PR to that too, but it's good. It's all good. So there's that, and that's fine. And then the bad news was sort of an asterisk because this is just based on a report from Reuters, which I would just remind you is not Bob's WeLeakStuff.com. It's Reuters, like they're actual reporters and journalists, right?
These
cite multiple sources, et cetera. But apparently Intel went after PlayStation's or Sony's business for the PlayStation 6, right? So AMD has been making the chips for, I know, the PlayStation 5. I want to say also the previous gen console. I'm not sure how far it goes back. I think AMD also makes the Xbox chipset, right? So the chips that are in the Series X and S, I believe, are also AMD. Good for them, right, for going after this.
Yep. Trying to bring it out of business.
They ended up not getting the contract. And there's been a lot of pushback from people on this. And it's interesting to me how people kind of argue about this, like as if this story was somehow like fake or, whatever. And to me, the big deal is like they went for it. And I think that's important because from a business perspective, it's right for business or for Intel to try to get that business, right? From Sony's perspective, it's right for them to kind of look at the competition. You never know. It could come in more technical prowess, lower cost, et cetera. We don't actually know, external to Sony, how happy they are with AMD. For all we know, they have a terrible relationship. Maybe they're not happy with the chips they've made so far or the chips they anticipate making for the next version, right? So I think it was smart for all these companies to kind of at least look at this. According to Reuters, the problem was not technical. It was just about money. So apparently
just a price thing.
Cheaper. Yeah.
Just
cheaper. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I mean, usually these deals are more complicated than that. They come into things like yields and return policy and all that sort of stuff. Like it gets complex.
Yeah.
How quick do you rev to the next chip's version? Like,
you're right.
But all of that has a cost assigned to it, so in the end, you can call it money.
Yeah. I mean, look, there are fans of all these companies who think whatever they think, and you could look at maybe Radeon graphics like in an AMD laptop even, and integrated graphics and say, hey, look, these things are way like Intel's really far behind in that area. It's fair to say that from an integrated graphics standpoint, Intel is in pretty good shape, but compared to the Radeon stuff, no. Like it's NVIDIA and Radeon, right? I mean, those are the two big players there. So does some of that factor into it? Does AMD have better graphics chipsets for the next gen PlayStation? Yeah, maybe. I mean, we don't know, right? This is just based on third.
And Cat Fay coming from the Twitch stream mentioned TSMC's operations in Arizona now making the A16 chip, which is for the iPhone 14.
Yeah, just be careful with that because they're not making all of them, right?
No, they're making
some limited.
If they're making any, that means there's a fab working, in North America. That's like 4 nanometer process, man. That's pretty badass.
That is good, yeah. This is, when relations between China and the United States were falling apart and people were calling on Apple to move as much as they could out of that country to wherever else, maybe Vietnam or India, wherever they could go. And then you realize this doesn't happen quick. You can't just say, yep, we're leaving China. A lot of the capacity is there. The people with know-how, they've spent years and years building out that stuff in partnership with those companies. So it's hard. You can't just pick up your ball and go to a different court. I mean, it's not that easy. So, yeah, you're right. The fact that they were able to get that going in the United States is actually pretty impressive.
And again, there's always problem. The challenge here is not building a fab. It's not getting the APL gear. That's not the problem. It's trained people.
Yeah.
Right. Like it is not easy. There's only so many fab factory engineers. It's hard work and it's a very specialized business. So the fact that they've got anything working at all is a good sign because now the training pipeline starts to grow out. There's a place to work and you can start expanding. So, good on them to actually get to the point where a fab is making anything.
And now Intel can start stealing those employees away since they're in the United States. It'll be fun.
Lovely.
No, it's all good. And then this, I didn't know where to put this. I'm not even sure this is worth discussing. It's just insane, and I feel like it kind of deserves some attention. I don't do, I can't really do a hands-on thing, but I do have this laptop here. So there's this big, heavy, thick-looking thing that is a Lenovo ThinkBook that is like Surface Book in that...
The screen comes off, right?
The screen comes off.
Yeah, I saw those pictures.
The difference is that the screen has a computer inside of it that runs Android, and it's a Snapdragon Gen whatever with 16 gigs of RAM and its own UFS 3.1 storage. It has its own webcams. It has its own everything. It's its own thing. And then in the bottom, there's a Core Ultra Intel, I think probably 32 gig of RAM, whatever SSD storage. Mm-hmm. And these two things are separate computers. And you can hit a button on it, and it's really quick. It just switches between the environments. And
this is wacky.
It's crazy.
This is wacky.
So, Yep. And
I kind of want one now that you've described it. Like that is weird enough that it makes me happy.
The name is even wackier.
I know the name is unnecessarily weird. It's not even clear if this is the full name, but it's ThinkBook. So they experiment with ThinkBook for some reason. This is something they've been doing for a while. Gen 5, meaning there were 4 gens of not this thing, but a previous ThinkBook Plus design that had different screens and different configurations. Hybrid. I think the full name actually includes. Station is in the name because there's more going on here, right?
ThinkBook Gen 5 hybrid station and tablet.
Yeah. So first of all, it's a laptop.
Even the Microsoft guys dude, you need to work on the name.
Exactly. The previous gen versions of this, there were 2 versions that had an e-ink display on the outside.
Okay.
Interesting, right? It's really thick, e-ink tablet, I guess. And then there was a couple of versions where they had an 8-inch tablet-sized screen on the wrist rest, which you could use in a dual screen configuration, either as a Wacom style, writing surface, or just as a second screen, which was stupid and made no sense. But I give them a little bit of credit for experimenting. So now we have 2 computers, right? Each with its own resources, RAM, storage, cameras, blah, 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 whatever. You can detach them. While they're detached or attached, you can use one or the other. This thing can be used as a standalone Android laptop.
This is not an all-in-one. This is an everything-in-one.
Yeah. So I'm struggling to figure out how I could just show this to you. But in addition to all that, you can integrate the 2 environments in interesting ways. So there's software in here that Lenovo
so they can
supplies.
see each other, they have a shared storage space.
Right. So if you've ever used a virtual environment, you've probably seen something like Apple does this with, or Parallels does this on Apple, where some of the folders are mapped so that when you copy to the desktop in the Windows environment, it copies to the desktop on the Mac. They can do that kind of thing. You can run the Android environment in a Windows as an app alongside your Windows apps if you want to do that. It's crazy. It's crazy town. So it's expensive, like north of $3,000 expensive.
Oh, geez. Well, you are buying two computers in one.
You are buying two computers.
I've never met a performant Android tablet that didn't cost too much.
Yeah, and I hate to be this guy, but I got to say the thing that's really compelling here is going to be when Apple does something like this with iPad and Mac.
I can't imagine them doing it, but
I know. But there's a stand. Oh, so
I'd
the picture,
be there for it.
There's a stand that comes with this. It looks like a weapon you would use in the Middle Ages to disarm like a mounted knight on a horse. And you it's kind of a weird setup. You detach the screen and you put it on the easel thing, the stand.
Right.
And then you have an external, like 29-inch display. You connect that to the base, which is a keyboard with a trackpad.
This is absolutely the mode I'd be using it in half the time.
Yeah, it's crazy town. Yeah. But it's also like, like this is actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, it gets. You're right. It went from "Are we jumping the shark?" to suddenly that's a cool looking shark.
Yeah. So with Surface Book, the computer was all in the screen, except for in the higher end versions where there was a GPU separately in the base. But other than that,
the base, that's right. So you had two video processors, one in the screen, one in the base, and when you're plugged in the base,
the integrated
more performance
graphics were in the screen. The DGPU was
but only one CPU.
When it's on the easel stand as a external
tablet.
monitor, is that wireless or is that wired?
It's wireless. You could do either one. Actually,
so it's actually acting as a monitor. It's not.
Yeah,
a wireless monitor.
Yep.
Cool. Okay.
Yep. It does all this stuff.
This is interesting.
This is insane.
You kind of run out of. There's so much like there's so many different configurations. It's kind of weird.
Is it loud?
So I'm going to fly to Mexico with this thing in my bag. So
okay.
when you never hear from me again,
it's because
someone in customs pulled me aside. And they saw this thing and said, I don't care.
They said, where we draw the line
this is like
megapixel camera on the back.
We allow Narcos to happen here. This is not happening.
Well, if there's a shell chipset in that tablet, then it's just a phone, really. It's about the same size as a phone.
Yeah.
So, and it's got cameras on the back. I mean, you could pass as a phone.
It's crazy. It's the world's biggest phone.
You did say you wanted a bigger phone.
I do adore how wacky Lenovo is. Like, they're just wacky.
This one, this is one of those crazy as a fox moments where you're like, this is crazy enough. It might just work.
Might just work.
It just
they clearly run a division of nutters. The fact that this made it to production, they didn't just make one and put it on stage.
Remember how crazy Surface Book was and how we laughed and how
laughed.
Hey, listen to me. Hold on. You're gonna try to interrupt, but hold on. You're gonna love this idea. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, it's hilarious though. It's awesome.
Wow, this is cool. But is it? How loud has it been for you?
The fans, you mean?
Yeah.
It hasn't been. Oddly, it's been fine. I mean, right now it's probably.
I totally understand why you didn't know where to put this because we don't have a section in the notes called crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's completely silent. It's crazy. Yeah, crazy time. That's the new segment, the new weekly segment on
Crazy Time,
and it's all just Lenovo stuff.
My big complaint about this thing as a tablet, the tablet is humongous, right?
Yeah,
but it's also a 16:10 display. So in portrait mode, it's it's tall and thin.
That's nice.
I do like 16:10 though.
I do too.
So it could be a tablet or a wireless display.
Yes, and it can also be an Android laptop if you want. Right? There's literally this button on the keyboard that switches, and it's instantaneous.
I love that little switch button.
It's crazy. So if you wanted to, so Android, like I said earlier in the show, is getting this windowing capability. This thing could turn into kind of a productive Android laptop, which is a mix of words that you all understand but don't make sense together.
Yeah,
right?
Now I'm starting to feel like the name isn't long enough.
Yeah, I know. You're right. You're absolutely right. ThinkBook Gen 5 hybrid station and tablet really doesn't encompass.
Town Edition
didn't cover enough.
I know, it's so weird. I don't know what to say about it. Anyway.
Keep on keeping on. That's what I say.
I wanted to mention it because it's nuts, and I applaud the effort.
We need to celebrate this just because it's so wacky.
It's so crazy.
I love it. So that keyboard is actually a computer. You can plug it into a display. Off you go.
You could take the keyboard with you.
Yeah.
And just use that as a computer, assuming you had a display, right? Somewhere, at work or whatever.
I don't know. Get a VR goggles set with a HDMI plug. You just plug it in. Be sitting on the plane with VR goggles and a keyboard in your lap.
Man, that is really interesting.
It is lappable. I'm just throwing it out there.
Fabulous.
I know, it's crazy.
Go Lenovo.
Lenovo.
While we all celebrate Lenovo, let's take a quick break so I can tell you about our next sponsor of this episode. It's 1Password who are bringing you this episode of Windows Weekly. I have a question for you. I have a feeling I know the answer. We're all going to cringe a little bit. Do your end users always work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? Yeah, no, they don't. I didn't think so. So how in the world do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all of those unmanaged apps and devices? What do you do? Well, turn to 1Password because 1Password has the answer. It's extended access management. 1Password extended access management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems that traditional IAM and MDM just can't touch. And, when you think about the way that we work, there are so many of these devices that aren't running on the system. In fact, just yesterday on Security Now, we were talking about how somebody in the U.S. Navy thought it'd be a great idea to set up Starlink on one of the naval ships. And by that, I mean a personal Starlink. And, maybe extended access management could have been helpful in a situation like that. Imagine that your company's security is like the quad of a college campus. There are these nice, beautifully placed brick paths that run between the buildings. This is the sort of rainbows and unicorns world that IT wants to live in. The company-owned devices, those IT-approved apps, and the managed employee identities. Unfortunately, we don't live in rainbows and unicorns. We live in the real world, which has things that aren't rainbows and unicorns. So there are the paths that people are actually using, the shortcuts that are worn through the grass that are actually the straightest line between point A to point B. Those are the unmanaged devices, the shadow IT apps, and the non-employee identities like contractors. Most security tools that you'll find, they happily work on those wonderfully placed brick paths, but the security problems are more often happening in the place where we're taking those shortcuts. 1Password Extended Access Management, it's the first security solution that brings all of these unmanaged devices, the apps, and the identities under your control. It ensures that every user credential is strong and protected, every device is known and healthy, and every app is visible. It's security for the way we actually work today, and it's now generally available to companies with Okta and Microsoft Entra, and currently in beta for Google Workspace customers. So check it out at 1password.com/Windows Weekly. That's 1password.com/Windows Weekly. And we thank 1Password for sponsoring this week's episode of Windows Weekly. Back to the show, and it's time for Xbox Corner, which I still think needs a theme song, and I'm sad it doesn't have one, or a jingle.
Yeah, we need more stings. Full stop, right?
I agree. Paul would love that.
We have a theme now. It's the sad trombone song.
That was fast.
You said the words out loud. Things are going to happen.
Also, 3-0 on the muting thing. Anyway.
Yeah.
Good job. Yep. I'm nailing it today. It's unbelievable. So, boy, we're having a good time here. But unfortunately, Microsoft has laid off more employees in the gaming division. They just keep dribbling this out. Again, the big issue I have here is just the constant nature of this. I do understand that when you subsume a company of this size, there are going to be redundancies and unnecessary employees.
So this is 600 from Blizzard
division. Well, not necessarily.
Well, because there's so many different groups, right? Like, where?
Right.
Is that ZeniMax? Is that?
Yeah. Well, we don't know. Yeah, it kind of behooves them not to say, I guess. Although I would imagine some of these people are probably going to go public at some point and talk about this. But What they did say was,
and to be clear, Microsoft's doing anything original here. There are layoffs across the gaming industry. It has become very
I mean, I made this point some months ago. If you look at the number of employees that Microsoft's laid off and compare it to elsewhere in the industry, it's not
substantial.
It's not up there. It's every job counts and all that, but I guess most of these were corporate supporting functions, not game developers or game publishers or whatever. So there were no games canceled. There were no devices canceled.
Right.
Kind of interesting they would say that. And no experiences being canceled, unless your experience being an employed person counts, I suppose. So unfortunately, that's happening. I wish they would get on top of this. It's it's almost been a year. Like, I wish we could, figure it out and be done. But anyway.
But nope, not the way.
No.
I'm almost beginning to think it's programmatic that a steady stream of minor, because they also meantime have 3,000 jobs posted. Right. Like at some point you say, hey, like these two things don't go together.
Well,
or you're just terrorizing your employees.
Yeah. Well, geez, God, I hope that's not that. It's still better than the corporate culture at Activision Blizzard. But yeah, I don't know.
But here's my argument: is before the pandemic, we were moving towards like the unionization of software developers. Like they were really getting their chops on this whole. We need a better deal, and the pandemic sort of wobbled all of that, and they overhired, and there was all these sorts of things. But I almost feel like they've gotten addicted to layoffs. Like it's just a good way to keep the thumb on the employees.
So Microsoft has been semi-unique in this space for being pretty good about unionization attempts, with one very recent exception with Raven Software we talked about back at the probably about a month ago.
Yep.
But they've they've recognized unions in the United States and elsewhere. They've they've come out and said, look, we're going to respect these efforts. We're going to allow them to happen. The Activision Blizzard quality assurance workers voted to unionize this year, et cetera. So, I mean, it's, I think a lot of this, well, at least for this round anyway, is more tied to, the redundancy thing, the kind of back-end business, not the developers, not the game publishers, that kind of thing.
I don't know the answer to that. And obviously they don't make any of it clear. So,
yeah. Well, they don't, it behooves them not to, I guess, in a way. But, this goes back so far, I have a hard time remembering this. But back in the Xbox 360 days,
holy man,
I know, there was there were a couple features related to like the social aspect of gaming, right? And so one was this friend request feature, which they got rid of. I don't even remember, Xbox One, maybe something like that. Or at least in Xbox Series X.
I mean, they were just copying Steam, who had it from the very beginning and still has it.
There's a rich history of that. I remember when they did the Kinect and they came out with whatever the version of Microsoft's Mii's were for the little cartoon little guys. We had, some of us still have those graphics on our accounts. Like,
right.
We've done this, for a long time. But anywho, they are apparently bringing this back. And so in a true social network, if you think about how like something like Twitter or whatever works, like you have friends, like the people you actually have connections with, and you both decide together we're going to, be friends and share information. Yep. And then you have followers, right? And the followers are people who could kind of see what you're doing, and you as an individual might be able to configure that, but also determine what those people see. Xbox used to have that too, right? And you could kind of picture people wanting to follow others, right, to see what their escapades are in certain games or whatever. But they don't have that. That's another one they got rid of. But they are testing bringing back this friend. Well, not friends. I mean, obviously they have friends, but friend requests basically. So so what's old is new again. And then my favorite story of the week. Microsoft has announced 3 more games coming to Xbox Game Pass in the second half of September. Can you guess
any of them you've heard of?
How many of them are Activision Blizzard games?
I think none. That would be a given.
None. Yep. I
can't even tease you about it anymore, buddy.
I know. I just don't even. I'm losing my mind. I mean, so they announced this this acquisition a year ago. So we're closing in on the 12-month mark here.
Yep. It's this month, right? It'd be 12 months. October is the anniversary
now. Yeah. So we've gotten 2 games, maybe 3 starting next month. We'll have 3. Yikes. So I can't remember anything, but I know Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, which is the thing I pay for, is $20 a month now.
Yeah.
I think for most of that year it was probably $17.99. I'm guessing. I would like my money back, please, because seriously, what is happening? But anyway.
Wow. They never promised those tier 1 games would show up in Game Pass. You just implied from everything they did.
Well, based on previous statements, and then the fact that the company that made those statements purchased another game studio. Yeah. I did sort of assume because they did say it. But.
Well, apparently you assumed incorrectly, Mr. Thurrott.
Yep. Just to pray we don't misassume it.
Wait, what are we do not change the deal.
Yeah. This is kind of a random note, but if you do play Overwatch 2 on Xbox, Overwatch is, I think, a Blizzard game, so it's owned by Microsoft. There's a bunch of bonus perks on there if you're a Game Pass member. Yeah, it's a Fortnite type, or like a fast moving. It kind of reminds me of Unreal Tournament, like a fast moving shooter kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's Blizzard's version of Fortnite.
Yeah, it's cartoony graphics, but very fast. So you should, if you're into this game, and that's fine.
And it's a competition game, right? Big esports game.
Yeah, right, exactly that kind of thing. And then I, of course, have linked to the wrong story yet again, right here at the end. But if you recall, and Richard, you might remember, this was probably, I feel like this was late last year, but Unity, which makes this game engine,
the most popular one in the world. You mean that one?
Yeah, those guys. They announced this kind of runtime fee for game developers that went over like a lead balloon. Like a lot of developers, they were like, "This is going to bankrupt us. Like, we can't actually do this."
You just destroyed the business. Yeah, that was literally This is literally this time last year.
I just looked it up. Yeah, you're right. It was this week last year. That's hilarious. Yeah. So they kind of went back and forth on this. The CEO had to apologize. I think they might have fired the guy.
They did.
And in fact, I think he might have been an ex-Microsoft guy. But anyway, it doesn't matter. January, they laid off a bunch of people. And then at the 1-year mark of announcing this, they were like, "Oh, we're just kidding. We're not doing that anymore." So, I mean, they got so much negative.
They finally fully backed off from it.
Yep. So I guess that's a good outcome.
John Riccitello. That was the guy. He's over
that's him. Actually, his
and
name
he was EA before he was Unity.
Okay, EA. Okay, I don't recognize the name, so I was wrong about that. But, so this is just oh boy. Anyway,
I mean,
I guess
there's been a wrestling match all along about how Unity survives as a company, grows, that kind of thing. Like this is the whole mono game. Like these guys started out as a Python shop, and then. And then Miguel Diaz-Casa convinced them the .NET was the way to go. They were the proof point that C# delivered. Like it's an important story. And I swear to you, half the games made these days come through Unity, and some really good ones, better ones than you think.
Yeah, this is a way you can write.
You can make modern games with Unity.
Yeah, that's right.
But and I think there's it might be just it's not that they make no money. They do. But I think they look over at multi-million-dollar titles made on Unity and go, "Hey, where's our cut?
We want a piece of that." Yep.
Yeah.
Look, I think customers would have accepted some structure that made sense.
Yep.
Frankly,
and it's also a way to present it, to sort of walk into like, we want to be fair here and, engage in conversation, even if you have an intentional outcome. I compare this to when Maker's Mark was running low on bourbon and said, "Hey, we're going to lower the ABV of Maker's Mark," and everyone went, "No, don't do it." So they raised the price instead. "Hey, we listened to you. You told us what you wanted. Now you can pay more, and it fixes the problem."
Yeah, don't ever listen to what customers ask for. That's a huge mistake.
You can listen.
Tell them what they want.
Yeah. I used to work in banking a million years ago, and our kind of saying was like, the customer is almost never right.
Wow.
Well, because they would
name
always
the bank.
Like
name
well, they're out of business now. Well, no. New England used to have a protected banking region, so eventually they let in the national bank, so they were all bought up. They didn't
protected. They didn't go is that bankrupt. Like where they've got people with swords and
it was a moat.
Standing outside?
No, it was just something probably dating back to the 1700s that for whatever reason.
Deploy the trebuchet.
If you were in the New England region, you could buy and merge with banks there, but not extend.
Oh, I see.
No nationals.
Yeah, so now it's all like everywhere else in the country now. But
anyway. Try and be.
But people would always come to you like, because it's money, it's your money, right? They'd be freaking out, like, where's my money? And then they'd be like, well, you took it out here and you did this with it here, and they're like, oh yeah, sorry, but they come in upset because it's like something you did, and it's like, no, we're not playing with your money,
right? We're not touching your money.
I mean, we are, but
again, the 1700s.
Yeah. Anyway,
you don't have to keep it in your mattress, but all right. Anything else you want to say about Unity?
No.
All right.
No, in fact, I hope to never speak about Unity ever again.
Oh, come on.
Correctly,
You are watching Windows Weekly, this week hosted by yours truly, Mikah Sargent, as well as, of course, Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell. We are going to be back in just a moment with the tips and picks, but I do want to mention a fun little thing called Club Twit at twit.tv/clubtwit. For just $7 a month, you can join the club. And when you do, you gain access to some pretty awesome benefits. Every single Twit show with no ads, just the content. You gain access to the Twit Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else. Behind the scenes, before the show, after the show, special Club Twit events get published there as well. And access to the members-only Discord server. A fun place to go to chat with your fellow Club Twit members and those of us here at Twit. Also, some special events take place there. Later today, I will be doing my next sort of hangout for Mikah's Crafting Corner. We have been slowly but surely building what is called Jason's Kitchen. It's a little miniature set here, and we've built it piece by piece. So we are working on
what is happening? What is happening?
This sort of sink situation going on.
Are you building a dollhouse? What is happening?
It's kind of like a dollhouse, but it's just one little piece of a dollhouse.
I like it.
So that's Mikah's Crafting Corner. You come with your crafts. It's just a cozy hangout time. You work on your crafts while I'm doing my sort of happy trees moments as we build these pieces together. And you heard it here first. Apparently, sometime soon, we're going to see Richard Campbell build a PC in the club. So
goodness knows when, but yeah.
Goodness knows when,
think that would be fun.
But it will happen or else. And so you should join the club at twit.tv/clubtwit. Again, just $7 a month. Paul and I both do shows for the club as well, so you can regularly tune into those and get the video versions of them. Thank you for being a member if you are one, in which case you're probably not hearing this unless you're watching live. But if you aren't, we'd love to have you. And now we are back for the back of the book, the tips and picks of the week.
You'll have to see when this comes out, but I did an episode of Hands on Windows, which I recommended. They call the Microsoft Paint Masterclass. I don't know if they're going to go with that name, but I hope they do. All right, so a couple of tips. Bill Gates has a new documentary series coming out on Netflix. In fact, it might have just come out. I have mixed emotions about this one. I'm going to try not to be super controversial here, but there was I think a 3-part Bill Gates documentary on Netflix a couple of years ago that I found to be an incredible bit of history rewriting on the part of someone who almost single-handedly destroyed the industry by himself. So I think he's trying to rehabilitate his image in his kind of philanthropist years, which I get. But
I think in the post-Melinda, who have you been hanging out with, Bill phase, you definitely need some branding work.
So you need some help. I just remind people like this, the name, I can't remember. I think it's called What's Next with Bill Gates.
Right.
This is the guy who wrote the book, The Road Ahead, and didn't mention the internet basically when the internet was happening. So I don't know. I mean, he's Bill Gates, so I'll probably have to watch it. But I don't know.
And considering the relationship between Bill and Reed Hastings, I suspect when he says, I'd like to do, he's going to get it.
Right. Yep. What's next? I'll tell you what's next. He's getting a Netflix series. That's what's next.
There you go. Yeah.
And then just randomly something that's happening online. Amazon's having their big Prime Day deal day thing back October 8 and 9. So if you pay attention to Amazon.com, which you probably do if you've ever bought something online, which you have, you start looking at Amazon.com right now because there's already stuff for sale.
I was like, don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. I know.
Where am I going to be October?
I hate
8,
Amazon
9.
so much.
Yeah.
I probably have an Amazon package arriving at my house every other day at this point.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. My problem is in October, I'm pretty much on a remote road for a month. So if I start ordering stuff, it's going to sit for a long time.
They need a scheduler, for this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Hold this until the 15th
hold it in some
of this month.
local facility until I, click the button or whatever. Yes. Actually, so one of the nice things about Mexico, by the way, is I can get Amazon there.
Right.
It's not 100%, obviously, of the stuff, and some stuff is more expensive, but some stuff is, cheaper too. It's kind of cool. And we do get next day there. It's crazy. At least in Mexico City.
Yeah, one of the nice things about living up on the coast here is that we have a mail box. They don't normally deliver to the house.
Yep.
So
But that's actually good because it will be safe and a thing. Yes.
Well, this is I can literally tell the postie lady Karen to say, "Hey,
Did
don't
you just
put
call her the postie lady?"
Yes, the lady.
Are
who
they
runs
called
the
posties?
You described her as the postie lady.
Well, in Canada, we tend to call them posties because up here we don't go postal like some countries. Did I say that out loud?
Always
That's
too
a problem.
soon.
A well-deserved dig, but go on.
But I have asked her, "Hey, I'm going to be gone for a month. Just hold my stuff, and I'll come and get it from you
that's
directly."
great. Yeah.
And that's fine because then it doesn't tie up space on the. We had the mailboxes are only so big, so there's parcel boxes, but they're shared.
Right.
Kind of thing. So what'll happen is in your mailbox there'll be a key to open that. Mm-hmm. So to tie that up for a month because I'm on the road would be rude. So it's like, hey, just hold these. I will be back. And
I'll be back.
And she's a Grolsch fan too. So I have on occasion just sort of dropped a 6-pack off on them. So
Nice.
I love living in a small town, man. Can't tell you.
I've always had
It's
good
so great.
relationships with the postal, UPS, FedEx, whatever delivery guys. The one here, though, I like the guy a lot, but he knows it's me, so he actually beeps as he drives up. So you'll hear him come. He'll be like, beep, beep. Yeah. And it's like, dude, what is this? Like I'm a Pavlov dog now. Like I'm like, oh my god! It's like
UPCs, UPCs.
Like I could be out in the world and hear like a car beep, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm getting something. It's
that's amazing.
I hate that I've been like trained.
He's running a test on you.
Yeah,
I'm not saying you don't go running out all excited.
I should tell you. I'm sorry, I forgot the point of that joke was I have walked outside of my house and no one was there. Because someone was just driving by and beeped randomly, and I was like, "Oh my god, here it comes!" And I'm like, "Where's the dog?" Like a dog waiting for his master to come home.
I'm so hungry.
Yep,
that's amazing.
Yeah, sad. This is what it become. Okay,
car horns make Paul drool. So noted.
Yeah, I wanted to. I have twice tried to do an episode on hands-on Windows. Speaking of that podcast about Explorer Patcher, it's one of many utilities you can use to kind of help de-insurify Windows, right? And so in this case, it's specifically for Explorer. It does a couple other things, mostly about Explorer. It is a technical app. It really screws with your system a little bit. One of the bits of advice I'm gonna put this in the book, not the Explorer Patcher bit, but this other bit of advice, which is if you've been around a while, you will know and recall that there was and still is a utility in Windows called System Restore, right? Mm-hmm. And whenever they introduced this, I want to say it might have even been XP, but whenever this came to light, it was a front end to a kind of a back end command line scriptable capability that Windows had for a couple of years previous. And what it gives you that kind of VM-like capability to go back in time, right? And so, back in the day before NT became the normal version of Windows, like you could install a bad driver and not be able to boot Windows, like it would never get in.
Yep.
And so, starting with Windows, actually Millennium Edition, and then with XP, they added driver rollback, etc. Mm-hmm. But if you think you're going to be doing something dangerous in Windows, you can just run start search and find it. It's still the classic system properties control panel with the multiple tabs that dates back a million years, but you can actually enable system restore. You can dedicate some amount of storage to these backups, if you will.
Make a restore point.
Make a restore point. And if you screw up your system, like if you install this app and somehow it screwed it up, although I've had pretty good luck with it, you can then restore it to that point. And system restore is important because you can get to it from the recovery environment. So you can boot your computer with your installation media, or if you made a standalone recovery disk, you can get to it from outside of Windows. You can actually roll back Windows to a previous point in time from outside of Windows. I'm just learning the language. It's fun. So you should know about that. And I think a lot of you, anyone listening to the show, probably is like, oh my God, right. You probably haven't thought about it in a while. It's still there, right? So you can still do this. I recommend trying it before you do Explorer Patcher. But what this will let you do is go back to previous versions of Explorer and multiple versions. You could go back to the version from Windows 7 if you wanted to, which is classic, literally. But the version I like is actually the version from Windows 10. And the reason I like it is it has a kind of a ribbon, but it's collapsed by default. And it doesn't have any of the annoyances of back up this folder, back up this folder, back up this folder. Because in Windows 11, it sits there like a little animated thing. If you're in desktop, documents, pictures, at least, and probably just those three.
Click me.
Yep, and it makes me insane, and I actually really like not having it there. So this is one way to do it. It's not the only way, but it's something to look at. It's free.
I got enough trouble with attention. Don't push it,
Yep. Yeah, it's like we let you work in your flow. Oh, unless you're not doing what we want, then we just do this to you all day long, and
then we try to do seizures.
Way. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, there you go.
Awesome.
Alrighty, now it's time for the Run As Radio. Tell us what's going on.
Well, and I talked a little bit about a show that's not coming up, coming for a few weeks from now.
Sorry.
But this week's show is with Eli Holderness, and we were talking about asymmetric encryption. And so Eli is a proper mathematician, like got the degree, educated in the space, but has moved very much into compute. Needless to say, mostly spends time in security because encryption, is a math problem without a doubt. And so they are speaking at all the conferences, and they started doing a particular talk on encryption. And we got into a conversation about it. I'm like, I should just make this show. Because, these days we use symmetric encryption primarily, right? This is TLS, this is SSL, like all that's what we're used to. And there's been a big push in the industry to get away from having these big jumps where we have to replace one technology with another to try and smooth things out. And on the other side of this is this expected threat from quantum computing for decrypting all kinds of things. And so moving off of prime number-driven encryption is, in general, like NIST is pushing on this. It's an upcoming force. And so this is where we ended up going. If you're a geek in this space, you'll enjoy this conversation because we totally geeked out. But at the same time, I kept pulling it back to, as an admin, here's what you can think about, because there are good solution paths being built for moving to new encryption types in the immediate future, the next few years, that you largely won't be disruptive, but they will be resistant to the emerging threats to various kinds of encryption. So even though we spent a lot of time explaining what asymmetric encryption is about, for most part, you won't need to know. It'll just work.
And now it is time for a blast from the past, a trip into the past.
That's this one I've had, at least. I'm ecstatic.
Well, it has gotten very funny on how we do a whiskey you've never heard of, because people keep bringing me weird whiskeys, and I love them. But this is the last of the classic malts. I felt like it was just time to. I shouldn't have been last. It's a great whiskey, and it's the Talisker 10. Which is on the Isle of Skye. It's located in a little village called Carbust, which is on the Mingus Peninsula on the Isle of Skye. The Isle of Skye is the largest of the Inner Hebrides Island. If you ever see a picture of it or you look at it on Google Maps, you'll see it sort of looks like a wing, although it does have a non-trivial set of mountains on it. It's important to remember that this was the land going back 20,000 years that when Doggerland was still exposed, before it became the North Sea. So this is all connected together, and people have been there for a very long time. Some of the earliest documentation of it goes all the way back to folks like Ptolemy in the Romans. He actually drew a map of it, and it was named Skytis, which is apparently a Celtic word for winged, because if you look at the land, it looks sort of wing-shaped. There's plenty of evidence there that there were humans that going back to the Mesolithic period. For those who are not up on their ancient history, this is Mesolithic meaning Middle Stone Age, as opposed to the Paleolithic and the Neolithic. What that actually means is the Mesolithics were probably the last of the hunter-gatherers. So this is 7 to 17,000 years ago. So tail end of the Ice Age kind of stuff. As opposed to the Neolithics, this is really when farming starts to emerge, at least in that part of the world. Although there's evidence that, and this is what's found in some of these sites in Skye, that the Mesolithics were starting to make pottery as well as stone tools and the like. And humans persisted in that area the entire time as the ocean rose up and cut off those islands and made them into islands. You go all the way through to the Iron Age. You have the Picts. There's writings about the Isle of Skye in Ireland from 700 AD. And the Vikings, of course, controlled this area. We've talked about the Hebrides before, all the way down to the Isle of Man, all sort of resolved back into what would become the Scotland with the Treaty of Perth in 1266. What do you need to know about Skye? This is the land of the Clan MacLeod. Yeah, the movie. Nice. But Dunvegan Castle has been the seat of that clan and is still an operable castle going back to the 13th century. So they, like I said, the lineages are long there. And of course, being in Scotland means they went through all of the troubles with the English, forced immigration, turning all the land into sheep farms, the famines, the pushing people into the other countries. In the middle 1800s, when the Talisker Distillery is founded, there's about 20,000 people living on Skye. By 1970, there's barely 7,000. Today, it's around 10. It may be an island, but there is a bridge, weirdly named the Skye Bridge, that connects it onto there. There's also a ferry available. And the business there these days is primarily tourism-centric. So lots of nature walks, great mountain climbing, scenic views. Talisker has been the only distillery on there since it was the only distillery started back in 1830. It's been there a very long time, although in 2017, the Thurrott distillery opened up. And so now there's, I think, just 3 or 4, right? I already mentioned Raasay, which is a little island right beside Skye, so it nominally doesn't count, but it's roughly in the same region. There is a whiskey called the Isle of Skye. It is not made on Skye. I've talked about it on the show. It's actually made in Glasgow. Let's not confuse those things. So Hugh MacAskill leases the land from the MacLeod clan in the 1830s. He does not name it for the village it's in. He names it for his estate, Talisker. And there's a bankruptcy. There's some changing of hands. In 1880, it gets a major rebuild. Then we come into the 20th century. Distillers Company buys it in 1925. This will eventually be acquired by Diageo, and of course, it's been owned by Diageo since the very beginning. Their distilling process was unusual. There's strong Irish influence because up until 1928, they were triple distilling, which is very much an Irish thing with smaller stills. But in 1928, they switched over to follow the Scottish convention of twice distilled, a low wine still and a spirit still. Famously, in 1960, there was a major fire that burned the entire distillery to the ground, and there was a big push to literally remake the original 5 stills in every detail. Took them a couple of years, and they still use those remade stills from 1960 to this day. So 2 wash stills of about 10,000 liters each, which are quite small, relatively speaking. Straight lie arms, which is unusual. So the swan neck comes up and it just goes straight out. They have 3 spirit still, also unusual. They're smaller, 7,500 liters. They don't have a reflex bulb, so one of the characters that we talk about in the Talisker whiskey is quite spicy, and there's an argument it's because there's less reflux, so more of those sharper flavors stay in with the whiskey over time. Use stainless steel mash tuns and wooden washbacks. This is very sort of standard stuff, and in the case of Talisker 10, at least, they age entirely in bourbon casks. And this, as I mentioned before, is one of the whiskeys of the classic malts of Scotland in 1988. This was a United Distillers promotion. And normally I wouldn't talk so much about marketing stuff, but this keeps coming up because it literally changed the path of whiskey. So whiskey did very well coming out of World War II in the 1950s and 60s. But as the economic doldrums of the 70s came in with the OPEC crisis and while runaway inflation, people turned to cheaper drinks. The other thing that happened, especially in America, was that soft drinks became very cheap. The advent of liquefied sugar, of high fructose corn syrup, cut the price of soda in half because they didn't need to use real sugar anymore. And so the highball became the drink, right? A Bacardi and Coke, that kind of thing, all pushed by spirits manufacturers, and whiskey sales dropped tremendously through the 70s and the early 80s. And then in 1988, this promotion came out, and what United Distillers was doing was they made a package essentially of 8 whiskeys. They called them the classic malts, and they were supposed to be all from different regions. The fact that Talisker is by itself on Sky is that for the most part, Talisker has always been referred to as just part of Islay because it's also a peated whiskey like all of the whiskeys are in Islay. That's not how United Distillers referred to it. United Distillers broke down these 8 whiskeys into, or these 7 whiskeys into 7 regions. So there was a lowland, which is a generally recognized region. That was the Glenkinchie. There was a Speyside, Cragganmore, which you've obviously talked about. Then there was Lagavulin, the Islay, and then there was they messed with the Highlands. They created 2 different regions of Highlands. So the Dalwhinnie 15 was considered a Highland, but so was the Oban 14, which is also Highland, but they called it West Highland, which admittedly it's on the west side of the Highlands, but so is Dalwhinnie. So okay. They didn't mention Campbelltown, which is generally a recognized region, but United Distillers didn't own a distillery there, so just leave that out. And then, of course, they called the Talisker 10 the Sky whiskey, which admittedly it is, and was at that time the only one, and it had been for like 150 years until 2017 when some of these others started opening up. At the time of the promotion, Talisker was producing 1.5 million liters a year of whiskey, which sounds like a lot. But within a few years, that doubled. Today, they make 3.5 million liters of whiskey a year. So the change was astonishing, the growth in the marketplace. And oddly enough, and this was not expected by United Distillers, they admitted as much, it was the peated whiskeys that did best. Both Lagavulin and Talisker just took off and became this huge product. And for the most part, Talisker really just made a 10. Only when it was bought by when Diageo took over in the 90s did they start making others. They made an 18 for a while, although it's periodic. In the early 2010s, when whiskey was doing so well that they simply didn't lay up enough, like you can't make a 12-year in less than 12 years. So when you start to run low, what do? So they started producing specialty versions without year notifications. Like if it has a 10 on it, it means that's the youngest thing in the bottle, right? But when they call it Storm, it's a 4-year-old, man. Like, and you don't want to put a 4 on the bottle. So you get these very young whiskeys where they don't want the names. They just blend them together to get a flavor profile that people like. So there are a bunch of unusual versions. In fact, Diageo has taken over that whole concept of the classic malts. They still release them, but now they do customized versions of them where they'll take the regular whiskey, but they'll do like a 6-month finishing in a sherry cask. So you can only find it in the collection. Normally, these were sold together. So the whole idea, one of the reasons it was so effective, it's like, hey, you can order this as a block and you'll get a good price on it. And so you get these 7 different whiskeys on your shelf all at once called the classic malts. And it's what, again, because they presumed the Cragganmore was going to be the hit and the Lagavulin ended up being the hit, they got bars to take on whiskeys they wouldn't ordinarily take on, and it worked. So you can go find the more expensive variants like this. There's the new release literally this year is called Talisker, the Wild Explorador. It's $140. Don't buy this. What the? It has no year on it. Like, what are you doing?
It's funny.
Anyway, buy the 10. The 10 is lovely. It is colored. Right? They have a consistency thing. It is chill filtered. It's 46%. Actually, they mark it as 45.8. I'll call that 46%. It's not a strongly peated whiskey. You know what I really like about Talisker? It tastes like it's on the ocean. It's got that little iodine nose, like that sense of the sea, a little bit of saltiness in the palate. And you really don't smell the peat going in, but a little smokiness shows up later. Like you had a fire on the beach. That's what it's like drinking that stuff. It's strangely aged in bourbon cask, so there's nothing fancy there. And yeah, but it's clearly from an island. And you can find it at Bevmo for about $75. It's absolutely worth having on your shelf. And if you're peat curious, this is a good place to start.
I'm listening.
A lot of people got confronted with an Ardbeg or a Lagavulin the first time they tasted whiskey, say, I don't like whiskey. And to that person, I hand them like a Dalmore 18 and ruin their lives. Now, you love a $200 bottle of whiskey because that thing drinks like smooth caramel. But when you want to start flirting with other flavors and people say, well, I'm kind of afraid of peats, it's like, yeah, try the Talisker 10. Don't do the Ardbeg 10. The Ardbeg 10 is like, I really have an urge to lick a forest fire. Like, Ardbeg will deliver. But if you want to come in slowly, come in with the Talisker.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of Windows Weekly. I already mentioned Club Twit during the show. I'll just remind you, twit.tv/clubtwit is how you go to sign up for $7 a month. Richard Campbell, of course, folks can check out your podcast, Run as Radio. Anything you want to pitch this week?
We're putting out a show every week as normal. We just wrapped up our Next Gen AI show last week. And now the ad you're going to see every so often on Run As is for our Fabric conference in April. Go to fabricconf.com. Look, it's going to be the second show we've done, the second annual. We sold it out, 4,000 people. We are planning for 8,000 for next year.
Wow. Awesome.
And so, expect it to be massive. The excitement around the product is astonishing and really happy with what we got done this year. So we're stoked to really go all out for next year.
Cool. That's amazing. And for you, Paul Thurrott at Thurrott.com, anything you'd like to let us know about?
Not really. Got a lot of book updates to do in the next month because of this stupid Windows thing I was talking about earlier, but I don't know. Not really.
All right. Head to Thurrott.com, THURROTT. If you'd like to get the show notes for this show, you can head to twit.tv/WW. Whenever we publish the episode, you'll find those there. The show records live every Wednesday, round about 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. I will not be back next week. Leo will be back, so you can tune in to watch the show live at that point. And, of course, available later on as a podcast that Kevin puts together in a nice, neat package. There's one thing I was going to say that I'm now forgetting.
Was it that I was 5 for 5 on the mute thing?
5 for 5 on the mute. That's exactly what it was. Congratulations. So, yes, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And they will see you again next week for another episode of Windows Weekly. Bye-bye.